She raised him like a child, dressed him, fed him, even gave him his own birthday parties. But on that hot July afternoon, something snapped. The creature she called family became something else, something primal, something deadly. This wasn't a zoo. This wasn't a wildlife preserve. This was her backyard, in front of friends, neighbors, and live stream viewers. And when it was over, there was almost nothing left of Camille Thorne. This is the horrifying story of how a beloved pet chimpanzee turned into a killer. This is Wait. Welcome to the Animal Quest channel. If you're into shocking true animal stories that expose the dangers behind exotic pets, subscribe now. Like, share, and join the conversation below before the next wild story breaks loose. Now, this is how it all began. Camille Thorne was living what many would call a dream life. 34 years old, stylish, confident, and successful, she had built a massive online following from the comfort of her suburban home in Lexington, Kentucky. But it wasn't fashion or travel that made Camille famous. It was Baxter. Baxter wasn't her child. He wasn't even human. He was a chimpanzee. Camille had adopted Baxter when he was just 2 years old, claiming he'd been rescued from an illegal breeder operating out of state. At first, he was small, clumsy, and adorable. Just another cute addition to her curated online world. But Camille didn't just treat Baxter like a pet. She raised him like a child. Literally. She dressed him in toddler clothes, fed him at the table, and even taught him how to sit and smile for photos. Her followers couldn't get enough. By the time Baxter turned 5, Camille's page had exploded to over 800,000 followers. People fascinated by what they called the real-life Planet of the Apes, but cuter. To her fans, she was an animal lover. To her friends, she was obsessed. Baxter had his own room, complete with a twin bed, a shelf full of toys, and a closet stuffed with matching outfits. Every year, she threw him birthday parties, complete with custom cakes, party hats, and guests. She once told an interviewer, "He's not a pet, he's my son." But not everyone found it charming. Neighbors began to worry. Some found it unsettling, the way Baxter would glare through the fence when strangers walked by. Others recalled hearing guttural screeches late at night, long after the lights were out. One neighbor later said, "She treated him like a son, but he was never really tame." And deep down, Camille knew it. Baxter was never meant to live in a house. He wasn't born in the wild, nor was he raised by other chimps. According to Camille, he had been rescued from a roadside exotic animal breeder in rural Mississippi when he was just 2 years old, already showing signs of intelligence, emotional attachment, and what she described as a remarkable gentleness. She often described him to her followers as brilliant and affectionate. He learned to open doors, sort colors, and even mimic facial expressions. Camille claimed he could understand over 100 English words and respond to simple commands. To her, Baxter was more than a companion. He was a miracle. But outside the frame of social media, things were different. By the time Baxter was 7, his body had changed. He wasn't the small, cuddly toddler Camille first brought home. He weighed over 140 pounds, stood over 4 feet tall, and his muscles had become thick and defined. Neighbors began reporting strange and disturbing sounds, deep, guttural shrieks in the middle of the night, sometimes followed by loud crashes. On 2 separate occasions, he had shattered the wooden fence behind Camille's property, escaping into a neighbor's yard before being coaxed back inside. A delivery driver once reported that Baxter lunged at him through a glass window when he approached the front door. Camille dismissed it, laughing it off online as just a mood swing. But experts, those who actually study chimpanzee behavior, saw it differently. One primatologist, when asked to comment on cases like Baxter's, stated bluntly, "Chimpanzees may seem cute, but by age 7, they're stronger than 5 adult men and capable of extreme violence. No amount of affection can undo millions of years of evolution." Still, Camille refused to see the danger. To her, Baxter wasn't just a chimp. He was her family. And as the years passed, that delusion only deepened. The warning signs weren't just there. They were screaming. But Camille either ignored them covered them up, or worse, convinced herself they didn't matter. The first major incident happened during a family playdate in early spring. Camille had invited her younger cousin and his children over to meet Baxter. What started as a lighthearted visit quickly turned terrifying. Without warning, Baxter grabbed Camille's cousin by the wrist and bit him, deep enough to require stitches. The man was shaken, confused, and angry. Camille begged him not to report it, insisting Baxter had only lashed out because he was startled and felt cornered. She paid the medical bill, deleted the footage from her home security system, and told her followers the get-together had gone beautifully. Then there was the day Baxter escaped. He had pried open a faulty window latch on the second floor and climbed out. A neighbor spotted him crouched on top of a backyard shed, smashing their bird feeder to pieces with a garden rake he had carried out from Camille's tool bin. When the neighbor approached, Baxter hissed, bared his teeth, and pounded his fists against the metal roof. Animal control was called, but before they arrived, Camille appeared, barefoot and frantic, pleading with the neighbor to keep quiet. She coaxed Baxter down with grapes and walked him home like nothing had happened. Still, she clung to her illusion. In post after post, Camille repeated the same phrase like a mantra. He's harmless when he's loved. But love doesn't erase instinct. It doesn't strip away the raw, untamed wildness that still lived inside Baxter, no matter how many costumes she put him in. A close friend later admitted, she had this fantasy that love was enough to civilize him, that if she gave him her whole heart, he'd stay gentle forever. But even on camera, the cracks were showing. Sometimes when Camille would try to record a video, Baxter would swat the phone from her hand or lunge suddenly at the lens. Camille would laugh nervously, brushing it off with a joke. But the tension was there. The flash of fear in her eyes didn't lie. And then one day, the fear became real. It was July 9th, 2022, a Saturday, clear skies, warm breeze. Camille had been planning the event for weeks, a backyard live stream party to celebrate reaching 100,000 subscribers on her channel. There were cupcakes, champagne, balloons, and a banner strung above her patio that read, "Thank you, fam." Around 20 guests milled about, close friends, a few online collaborators, and local fans she'd invited to meet Baxter in person. A ring light stood on the lawn. Her phone was propped up on a tripod, broadcasting it all live. At first, Baxter seemed calm. He sat near the snacks, nibbling on watermelon slices with his fingers. Camille had dressed him in khaki shorts and a little Hawaiian shirt, the kind meant for toddlers. Guests laughed, took photos. Some even asked to take selfies with him. But then came the music, loud pop hits thumping from a Bluetooth speaker. Then the camera flashes, and then the people. All of them loud, unfamiliar, moving fast, touching him. Baxter began to pace. Camille noticed and tried to calm him, crouching beside him and offering a juice box. But Baxter snatched Camille's phone from the tripod and hurled it across the yard. It smashed against the patio bricks. Guests chuckled awkwardly, unsure if it was part of the act. Camille gave her usual nervous laugh, brushing it off. "He's just excited," she said. But what happened next was not excitement. It was something else. In a split second, Baxter lunged. He slammed Camille to the ground with the weight of his full body. There was no warning, no buildup, only the sickening sound of skin tearing. His teeth sank into her cheek, then her neck. Her screams rang out across the yard, sharp and frantic. Blood sprayed across the stone tiles as she thrashed beneath him. People screamed, some ran, some froze. A few lifted their phones and kept recording. Baxter didn't stop. He dug his fingers into her scalp, yanked out clumps of hair, and tore chunks of flesh from her face. Camille's screams twisted into gurgles. She tried to crawl away, but he dragged her back like a rag doll. One guest managed to dial 911. Through sobs and gasps, her voice cracked through the phone. "He's eating her! The chimp is eating her! Oh my God! There's blood everywhere! Please, someone get here! He won't stop!" But by the time help arrived, it was already far too late. The first police officers arrived 6 minutes after the call was made, but those 6 minutes felt like an eternity. The scene that greeted them was horrific. When they pulled up to the house, Camille was motionless on the ground, her body mangled. Baxter was still on top of her, chewing and tearing at the remains of her face. His movements were quick, frenzied, almost like he was still in a frenzy, unable to recognize the line between play and death. A body cam footage from one of the officers captured the moment the team entered the backyard. The camera swung toward the gruesome sight, and the officer's voice was steady but shaken. "We have a visual. Subject is consuming flesh." The officers froze for a moment, unsure of what to do. It wasn't a situation they were trained for. A chimpanzee this size in a full violent state could kill or severely injure anyone who approached. They knew they couldn't wait for animal control. There was no time. "Shoot him," one officer said. Without hesitation, the officers opened fire. 3 shots rang out in rapid succession, echoing through the backyard. Baxter, the animal who had once been Camille's companion, collapsed instantly. His body slumped next to hers, the blood still pooling around them. But the horror didn't end there. A neighbor standing nearby began to sob uncontrollably. "They raised him like a baby," she gasped between tears. "And he died like a monster." In that moment, there was no question of whether Baxter had been treated as a child or a pet. The truth was undeniable. He was wild, a force of nature that could not be controlled by affection or good intentions. The backyard, once filled with the sound of laughter and celebration, now fell silent, except for the sounds of the officers securing the scene. Camille Thorne, the woman who had loved Baxter like no one else, had lost her life at the hands of the very animal she had tried so desperately to tame. When the paramedics arrived, it was already too late. Camille Thorne was pronounced dead on arrival at the hospital. Her body had been brutally torn apart. Severe facial trauma, deep dismemberment. The extent of the injuries was so grotesque that it left medical personnel in shock. It wasn't just a tragedy. It was a clear indication of how wrong things had gone. The news spread quickly through the small town of Lexington. Neighbors who had once waved at Camille in the driveway now stared at her house in disbelief. How could this happen? How could someone who had raised an animal like a child end up in such a horrific way? But while the community mourned, the story ignited a firestorm of controversy. Local officials and animal rights groups began questioning the legality of exotic pet ownership. Should people be allowed to keep dangerous animals like chimpanzees as pets? The incident sparked renewed debates about animal rights and public safety, and within days, public officials began issuing statements about the need for stricter laws on exotic pet ownership. In the immediate aftermath, Baxter's remains were tested for any signs of disease. Experts found no evidence of rabies or illness. His behavior wasn't the result of a sickness, but something far more primal. The attack, they concluded, was the result of instinctual aggression that had been building over time. Meanwhile, online, the backlash grew fierce. People were divided. Some blamed Camille for putting herself and others in danger, arguing that no amount of affection could tame a wild animal. She should have known better, they said. This was bound to happen. Others mourned Camille's death, acknowledging the tragedy while pointing fingers at the exotic pet trade. They argued that it was the system that had failed her. Unregulated breeding, irresponsible selling, and a culture that treated dangerous animals as entertainment for profit. Many blamed the desire for internet fame and the culture of cute pet videos for encouraging the ownership of animals that were never meant to be domesticated. In the weeks that followed, officials made it clear this was a wake-up call for the dangers of unregulated primate ownership. A statement from the local animal control office described it as a tragic incident that highlights the risks of keeping wild animals in a domestic setting. The tragedy of Camille Thorne and Baxter became a symbol, not just of the love gone wrong, but of the bigger issue, the line between love and nature, and how easily it could be crossed. Camille Thorne believed she could raise a wild animal like a human. She thought that with enough love, enough care, she could tame what nature had made wild. But the truth is, love cannot erase nature. Baxter didn't betray her. He didn't become a monster. He simply became what he always was, a wild animal, bound by instincts too strong to ignore, no matter how deeply he was loved. The tragedy that unfolded in Camille's backyard serves as a painful reminder of the dangers of treating wild animals like pets. While the story of Camille and Baxter was once a story of affection and companionship, it ended in bloodshed. And it's not just Camille who suffered. The consequences of owning a chimpanzee, or any wild animal, are far-reaching and, as this case shows, often deadly. As the authorities close the book on this chapter, there's a final lesson to be learned. Exotic pet ownership is not just a personal choice, it's a public safety issue. And until laws change, and until society begins to understand that wild animals belong in the wild, tragedies like this will happen again. The blood-stained patio where Camille once celebrated her online success now stands as a shocking monument to a mistake that cost her life. The framed photo of Camille and Baxter, smiling together in happier times, is now a haunting reminder of what was lost. The gate labeled "No Exotic Pets Allowed" is locked, but the lesson for those willing to listen remains open. Wild animals are not toys, and they are certainly not pets. As my final message, remember this: chimpanzees are not pets. They are wild animals. Tragedies like this will happen again, unless we learn. If you found this story powerful, if it's opened your eyes to the dangers of exotic pet ownership, please consider sharing this video. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that expose the harsh truths behind animal attacks, and hit the like button if you believe that no animal, no matter how cute or how loved, should be confined to a life they were never meant to live. Share this message and help prevent the next tragedy. Thanks for watching.